This week, I'm talking about compression. Think you understand compression? I bet you don't. Okay, well obviously some of you do understand compression, but compression is one of the most misunderstood, misrepresented and misused tools in our arsenal. And in this video, I'm going to hopefully bust a couple of myths and show you what compression actually is and what it does. Okay, so here's a little clip of some music. And here's another. Which did you prefer? Probably B, because clip B was played back at a louder volume. It's exactly the same content, just played back at a louder volume. So during the 1930s, Fletcher and Munson were doing research for Bell Laboratories, and they discovered that humans have different sensitivities to different frequencies at different volumes. This work was carried on by Robinson and Dadson in the 1950s, and basically we can amalgamate all this information to put into one simple piece of information. Louder sounds better. Louder does sound better. We just proved that with our little demonstration. But we shouldn't be tricked, because quite often when we use compressors, the output volume is louder. That is the number one reason why people misuse compression. They do not level the output volume to the same as the input volume. Hey, it sounds better, this compressor sounds better, and there are guitar effects pedals that do exactly this. This compressor sounds better, and really what's just happening is they're being tricked by the increased volume. What does a compressor actually do? Well, it's really simple. Just imagine a tiny little goblin inside each compressor who turns the volume down when it gets too loud. The thing is, these adjustments can be made so fast they can happen within the single cycle of a given frequency. So what are the 5 controls on a normal studio compressor that we need to understand? Well, we've got a threshold control. This controls the point at which the compressor starts to kick in. If the input voltage is above a certain threshold, then the compressor will engage. The second knob we want to think about is gain reduction, and this is measured as a ratio. So once we exceed our threshold, we go into the gain reduction area of the compressor. Now, if we have a 2-to-1 gain reduction, we need to increase the input by 2 decibels for every 1 decibel increase on the output. If we have a 3-to-1 gain reduction, we need to increase the input by 3 decibels by every decibel the output will increase by. So as you see, we're gradually scaling down the volume that's coming in once we exceed the threshold. The attack control simply delays the effect of the compressor. It delays the implementation of gain reduction once the threshold is exceeded. So, for instance, we might use this to allow transients to sneak through the compressor if we want to increase the transient to sustain level. The release control is simply the opposite of the attack control. It simply delays the return of gain reduction to 0. So, perhaps we might have exceeded our input threshold and then we've got some content that sneaks through below the input threshold, then our gain reduction slowly sneaks back to 0 decibel reduction. Makeup gain. Well, we use makeup gain, as mentioned in the Fletcher-Munson section, to stop the compressor tricking our ears by just putting out a volume that is higher. We can hear the effect of the compressor more if we level our input and output levels correctly. So we can skip between bypass and engaged mode on the compressor and make an informed decision as to whether the compressor makes an improvement to the sound quality or not in our context. So we know what compressors do now. What are they for? Well, in general, they're for allowing us to increase the volume of a specific component within a mix, a track, without it popping out of the mix. So we reduce the transients, allowing us to increase the volume overall. Now, we can also do really clever things like make something sound as if it was hit harder. For instance, this snare drum. Yeah, it sounds a bit weedy, doesn't it? As I pass it through a compressor with a fast attack, the transient is caught and reduced. The ring stays the same volume. We then have the opportunity to increase the overall volume, so the snare is brought up to the same average volume as the initial sound. Let's hear them in comparison to each other. Here's the snare without compression. Here's the snare with compression. Yeah, it sounds louder, doesn't it? And that's one of the wonderful things we can do with compression. We can use the attack and release controls to change how things sound in terms of time. We can make sections of each waveform push more, or we can clamp down on things to make them fit more within a mix. Yes, overuse of compression can be nasty to the ears, but if we really know what we're doing with a compressor, we can fine-tune our controls to achieve the desired result. So with all that in mind, let's move forward, and in our next mix we can think about why we're applying the compression and whether it is actually making a difference. Happy recording, see you next time.